I have the keys to 2018 Porsche 911 GT3, and I have 1 mile to drive it and give you my impressions. But before we go on that drive, let me tell you a little bit about this car. First off here's a color you don't see too often, and that is graphite blue metallic. Apparently it's a little more common down here in Southern California, but back home in Maryland, it's just not all that common, and I really like it. I love blue, it's understated, and personally it kind of flies under the radar. It's a little bit different from your average gray. So this GT3, it's a 991.2 generation. So after Porsche came out with the 991.1 generation GT3 and GT3 RS, they had stuck with PDK only, so it was an automatic transmission only. And Porsche owners and potential owners around the world, especially in the US, said, we want a manual transmission. So for the 991.2 generation, which this car is, they brought it back and gave you a choice between PDK or manual. This one is a 6-speed manual, so it's my kind of car. I love having a manual transmission, as good as PDK is. I appreciate the driver engagement that a manual offers. The GT3 at this point came with a 4-liter flat 6, revved to 9,000 RPM, makes 500 horsepower at a bit over 8,000 RPM, and 339 pound-feet of torque, which means you really have to wind this engine out to really get moving. It is not one of those turbocharged 3-liter units that gives you torque from no RPM all the way through the rev range. But we like that because it makes you work for your reward. 6-piston calipers up front, 4-piston in the rear, and a mechanical limited slip differential. Now it's been a few years since I drove a 991.2 GT3, and that was a touring model. So this is actually my first time in a regular winged GT3. Now, I've got a mile to drive it. To give you my impressions, let's hop on in.
Be sure to log into your YouTube account, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a video. Best of all, it's free to do so.
So this is one of those halo cars that I think any Porsche owner would aspire to, including me. I would love to own this car. GT3s are borderline exotic. You could probably consider a GT3 an exotic car in most circles. So right off the bat, you know, I'm already very excited for this drive. And I've driven a 991.2 before, just not one with a wing. First off, you'll notice that the seats are the carbon fiber buckets, and they have, the previous owner of this car put in these Pepita seat centers, which look fantastic, and they look basically stock to me, like Porsche could have done it themselves. And of course, that's what Porsche is doing now with their cars, offering all sorts of customization with different patterns. So in a GT3, I forgot, you put this key in there, there's no start button. That's something I should know right off the bat. Oh yeah, there we go. And there's a Sharkwerks exhaust on this car, so it's a little bit louder. Owner told me to put the exhaust flaps open to make it louder, which I just did. And yeah, it's noticeably louder than a stock GT3 exhaust, but not too much so, at least at idle. The reverse gear detent is all the way to the left and front. So I can already tell the gear shift lever is a very smooth yet mechanical feel, just like I remember GT3s having that I've driven in the past. So this is where that nose lift system is becoming handy. I put it back down. I don't know how you would go driving around in this car without one. Yeah, very positive shift throw. The clutch pedal is very nicely weighted. I just drove a 997.1 GT3, and that clutch pedal is much heavier than this one. So right off the bat, you know, I'm liking how the weights of the controls feel in relation to each other, including the steering. Really easy gear shift lever to work. When I was in a 992 GT3 recently, it was a little bit tougher to do part throttle upshifts and get it smooth, but this seems to be very, very easy. I really like that. So let's try a little throttle blip. Yeah, very easy. You know, I definitely have to work on timing that correctly. We've got a lightweight flywheel, I believe, in this. But yeah, sounds great at 4,000 RPM right now. Coming up to a turn. Now this is a really, really tight road, so I'll be taking it easy on it because it's been a while since I've driven this in my hometown of San Diego in North County. So the suspension is actually fairly compliant right now, and I believe it's in its normal setting, and I'll probably leave it there. Yeah, definitely this Sharkwerks exhaust is louder than before. Oh yeah, you can definitely tell the difference between a 997 GT3 and this one with 500 horsepower. This has a lot more go, and I feel like I need to be a little bit more careful driving on a twisty road like this. And this is a second gear road in this car. I was only at 5,000 RPM, and I still have 4,000 RPM to go. Hadn't even gotten close to the torque peak. Yeah, very cool. Love the Sharkwerks exhaust. And we got a big truck here, so I'm gonna give him a little bit of room. Now what I always love is that even though this isn't the Metzger GT3 engine anymore, in a lot of ways, this new one is better. It can lower the center of gravity a bit, just the way that they have the crankshaft position, and not the same type of engine as before. So it's superior, feels very similar to a Metzger. Maybe not quite that rough edge, but very similar sound. Now I've got the nose lift on again, and here we go. Nose lift off. First gear. I'm not going to floor it in first gear, I don't think. This road's too twisty. Yeah, this car is very powerful. Yeah, you can definitely tell that 500 horsepower is enough to overwhelm the rear tires of this car compared to a 997.1. So a little extra care is required when you're getting into the newer generations of GT3. You know, even though the older ones might be a tad more analog, it's not by much, but these just have a ton more horsepower. Brakes feel great, pedal feel is nice and firm, easy to modulate. Trail off the brake a little bit, although I'm not at a very fast pace right now. I am just cruising along comfortably, because this is not a car that I'd want to do any damage to, but at least there's a straightaway here. So that was almost 9,000 RPM. So a little taste of what this thing sounds like, and I just couldn't keep my foot in it all the way to 9,000 because, again, this is, I like to say this, but it's true. When you have 500 horsepower and you have to wring it out to 9,000 RPM, there are stakes involved. It is tough to keep your foot planted into the throttle. It really is. So the ride is actually more compliant than I remember in the 991.2 GT3 touring that I drove. So yeah, I've been trying to calibrate my senses after driving the 992 GT3 and GT3 touring, and now this 997 from a couple days ago. And yeah, it's just amazing what Porsche does with their suspension damping. And even without the double wishbone front suspension that the new car has, this one here is still very compliant. So that is just about the end to our 1 mile review. I'm going to put the nose lift up so that it's nice and easy to go over this little driveway here. I'll do that nice and slowly. And here we are, back to where we started. So, wow, what a car. Having driven that 997 GT3 that I was talking about just a couple days ago, and now this one, the differences are stark. There's a very similar feeling between the two cars, but this one just feels a lot faster. It feels like there's a bigger gap between 415 horsepower and 500 that this one has. It's very, very quick. Takes a little bit longer to get comfortable with that sort of power. So this is one of those cars that'll take a bit more time to really, really get used to and attack a back road like that. You know, it's something you'd want to be very careful with. You know, it's a GT3 is a car on the edge. But onto our ratings now. So, car show. GT3s always do great at car shows because they're GT3s. And this one's no different. It has a big wing. It's got a rare paint color. It's not the flashiest paint color. I personally like it. Might fly under the radar for a few people. But then you look inside the car and you see the fire extinguisher, which I believe was a factory option, and the nice red belts and the red stitching, and particularly this Pepita fabric on the seat centers. Yeah, it's a stunning car to look at, and it's up my alley because I don't like super flashy cars. I don't want to draw more attention than I need to myself when I'm driving a car like a GT3. So for car show, I'm going to give this a 9. If it were in some crazy color like lizard green, maybe it would be a 9.5 or something like that, 9.25, but this will get a 9. For daily driving, you could daily drive this. You know, I feel like every Porsche that I drive, almost every one, you can daily drive and be fairly comfortable in them. There are varying degrees of comfort. You know, Panamera is going to be better than 911, but they can all be daily driven. This one wouldn't be too bad, except for the fact that it's a little bit stiff for a daily driver, but more compliant than I remember the 991.2 GT3s being. Doesn't get great gas mileage, and this would also be a car that people might look at. They'll be looking at your car rather than the road. So maybe not the easiest car to daily drive in, but you can do it fairly easily. And it's a new car. You have your Apple CarPlay, I believe, in this, and an infotainment system that'll be just fine. So I'm going to give it a 7. You know, a Carrera might go up a notch or two to 8, you know, but for a GT3, I'll make that a 7. And that's also partly because of that big rear wing. For road trip, this will be a little bit higher, but this is also a road trip kind of car where you want to arrive at your destination in it, or have this car at your destination, and that's reason enough to road trip it. It'll be comfortable enough. You have plenty of storage back there with no rear seats, and in the frunk, and you'll be fairly comfortable as long as you fit in these carbon bucket seats. I'm going to give this a 7.75 for road trip. Fun factor. So a GT3 is always a car that has many layers to peel back before you start to really get to know it. I've had the opportunity to drive a 991.2 GT3 Touring, not on a lot of twisty roads, but it was a road trip and for that car. So I'm not really all that familiar, and it showed out there. 500 horsepower is a lot, and you could be going really, really quickly. Fun factor is going to be high on this car. It's going to be a 9.5 because it doesn't get much better than this, and it'll provide years of enjoyment before I feel like I've even reached the limits of a 991.2 GT3. Thanks for watching the video. If you like this video, please smash the like button. If you like content like this, like our weekly 1 mile reviews that drop every Saturday, or all the other videos and podcasts and live shows that we do, please subscribe to our channel. Help us get to 100,000 subscribers. Have a good one, and until next time.